I'm Sue McLean. I'm a partner in the IP Data and Technology Group at Baker McKenzie in London. I'm also a trustee and vice chair at SCL and chair of the SCL Women in Tech Law Group. Now, for those of you who don't know SCL, and hopefully there's some new attendees out there, the Society for Computers and Law is a UK charity which was founded almost 50 years ago now. Our mission is to inform and educate legal and technology professionals, academics and students, and the wider audience and community on the impact of technology on law and legal practice through the promotion of best practice, thought leadership, and the fostering of a global tech law community. Our women's network was set up a few years ago, and our mission is to advance, celebrate, and connect women in technology law across private practice, the in-house community, academia, and the legal tech sector. And I think given our global tech law community role, I'm very pleased to be hosting this first session of our new Women in Tech Law Around the World series, where we're going to be joined by technology lawyers from various regions of the world, thanks to the power of technology. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by three terrific panelists all the way from the United States. We've got Alison Lauterbach-Dale, who is Privacy Counsel at LinkedIn in San Francisco, Marcela Robledo, who's a partner and colleague of mine at Baker McKenzie, also from the West Coast, who focuses on technology. And last but certainly not least, Amanda Brino, who is Senior Legal Counsel in technology at Accenture, but she's on the East Coast, so she's just outside of Washington, DC. And a great warm welcome to all three of you. And we're really very delighted that you could spend the morning, your time with us today. So thank you so much. And we've got some chat already. Oh, hello from Baltimore. Brilliant, Heidi. Thanks for joining us. We've also put in the chat function everybody's LinkedIn details. So this is a network, so please do feel free to reach out to us or learn more about us during the session or afterwards. In terms of today's session, really this is an informal, chat discussion with our panelists, learning a bit more about them, their career journeys, and also their views on, legal tech and legal developments. But really it's about profiling, celebrating women in technology, including our, our peers and counterparts over the pond. So I've got obviously tons of questions that I'm burning to ask our panelists today, but if you have questions, please do raise them via the Q&A function and we'll try and weave them in. And also please do join us via the chat and, include any reflections you have or any insights that you would like to share with the group. That would be terrific. But on that note, I'm going to make a start. And I always think it's terrific if, rather than me read out people's bios, we can, from the horse's mouth, understand what our panelists do in their own words. So perhaps I'll start with you, Amanda. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your role involves working in-house as a tech lawyer at Accenture, and perhaps a little bit about what you love most about your work, your job?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sue. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. So in my current role at Accenture, a lot of what I do is related to blockchain and multi-party systems. That's my area of focus these days, which I'm sure you've heard about blockchain. I know you've heard about Bitcoin. And although blockchain drives Bitcoin, Bitcoin is not the only thing going on in blockchain. And that's what's exciting about my role is what are all the different applications of a distributed ledger technology that we can use and how it can transform business. And so for me, it's exciting because it's about the technology, how the technology works, but really because of the decentralized nature of the technology, it's how can parties and businesses and people work together in a different way, leveraging this way to share their information. So I'd say that's probably one of my favorite parts about my job, and also the part of my job that keeps me busiest, because it's like we're also used to, potentially working in silos with our, our colleagues maybe within our company, or even siloed sometimes within our company. And so how do you break those barriers and figure out, okay, how do we share information in a different way? And so, looking through that and then looking through what are the, regulatory issues that could come up depending on how the technology is used in different industries, or how, how the business will need to make sure that they're not dealing with competition issues because they're trying to share information with competitors or other businesses in a way that could run afoul of competition law. So there's a lot of existing legal issues that you just see in a different way with a new and developing technology. So that's been a big part of my job and a lot of fun. And I would say I really enjoy being an advisor to the business. I think, when I was in contracting, I got to do that in a very specific way. Here, because of the nature of growing the offerings in blockchain and multi-party systems and developing them and thinking through strategy, it's allowed me to connect with the business in a new way, which is really fulfilling for me from a legal perspective.
Absolutely. And I think new technologies is certainly, I think, what powers a lot of our interest as tech lawyers. There's just always something new and exciting, that the clever technologists are coming up with, but throws up all these new legal issues. Maybe I'll come to you now, Alison. Can you tell us, what's it like being a privacy lawyer at such a huge tech company like LinkedIn, and what do you enjoy most about that role?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a great panel, and I'm excited to be speaking to women and men from all over. So my background is in tech, transactions, and privacy. And for those of you who are at the beginning stages of your career, what I would say is take whatever opportunity, whatever door opens. You never know where you're going to end up, because I never anticipated that I'd be doing data privacy for a big tech company. And yet here I am, and I love my job. I know that we chatted about this prior to the session. I will say that my views are my own, so I'm not speaking on behalf of LinkedIn. That being said, it's a very exciting place to be working on data privacy. Social media is at the forefront of a lot of these questions. I'm proud to work at a place that takes privacy as seriously as it does, and is really stands behind their commitments in that regard. And so in that way, my job it's challenging, but knowing that I'm working with team members, both cross-functional and internal to legal, that really believe in privacy is a great experience. I would say that in my support of the commercial team, I draw a lot on my tech transactions background with my data privacy expertise, which is a really great skill set, given that privacy is the next frontier and tech is not going anywhere. So in my day-to-day, I advise and negotiate our customer privacy questions. I negotiate our contracts and address customer privacy questions. But we are a leanly staffed legal team relative to the size of the company. We have, I think, about 130 or so worldwide. So it's not just commercial transactions. I'm also negotiating internally, I would say, and developing and assisting on the development of privacy practices and policies, new product development. So what I like most about my job is that no one day is the same as the day prior or the day in front of me. And I'd say coming out of private practice, I'm about 1.5 years out of being at a firm, there's no way to mitigate risk. When you're in a law firm, I'd be curious as to the other panelists' perspective on this. The best advice I was given was by a colleague from law school who went in-house. And she said, when I was prepping for my interviews, there's no way to mitigate risk. When you're in a law firm, you always want to give most likely the most conservative advice. But when you're in-house and at a large company where they want to get the tech products out, but they also want to be respectful of LinkedIn member privacy and customer personal data, how do you balance those things? So it's that balance, and it's that intellectual kind of agility that you need in order to balance all those things. It's never just what is legal, what is not. I mean, obviously, we're never going to advise our customers or our clients to ever do anything that is not legal. But most often the answer is it depends. And that's where our work is. It's in the gray area of it depends. So I know that was I kind of touched on everything, but that's also why I like my job, is because I get to touch on everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Variety. And that is a real skill of the in-house lawyer, is the sort of being the problem solver, not being the barrier. But sometimes that, makes for interesting conversations with colleagues, I'm sure. Now, Marcela, you are like me, right? So we are, you're effectively doing a similar role to me in the West Coast. But if you could explain to the audience as well what you do, because again, I think your role tends to be very varied.
For sure. And Sue, thanks for Thanks for having me here. And it's great to be here with Amanda and Allison. So I'm a tech transactions partner. I'm based in Baker McKenzie's San Francisco office. Like Allison, I'm a combo of tech transactions and privacy. A lot of what I do is I support M&A transactions or just general deals where there's intellectual property and privacy aspects of those deals. And so I negotiate software license agreements or standalone IP licenses, cross licenses, just cloud agreements, things like that. And I also have a standalone IP transactions practice where I do I do a number of different commercial transactions, whether it's supply agreement, a lot of like complicated development agreements, collaboration agreements. Because I'm in California, I do a lot of software deals. And so a lot of focus on software and just technology generally, which is actually really interesting because there's technology everywhere, right? Like you no longer think about tech companies as just like the LinkedIns of the world, the Microsofts of the world, right? There's technology everywhere now, and everybody's moving into this whole area of digital transformation and incorporating technology into refrigerators, microwave ovens. And so it's actually really fun. That's the fun part about my job, that even in oil rigs where you traditionally wouldn't think of having technology, there's technology in there. And like Allison said, no day is alike. Every day I have to do a list of, okay, what do I have on my plate today? And sometimes it's a company involving airplanes, and sometimes it's a company involving zippers. It really is A to Z. So that's what makes it really fun, the variety of it.
Yeah, we had it at the SCL. We have an annual conference, and not last year, but the year before. The sort of tagline was "Everyone's a tech lawyer now," because as you say, it's not. Originally it was the tech companies, and then maybe very large institutions like the banks and financial services. They always use tons of technology, but you're right. Nowadays, it could be an agricultural company, it could be healthcare company. Tech has just become part of everyone's role. So here at SCL, we're definitely open for for our network to be as broad a church as possible, because there'll be lots of folk in house now in non-tech companies who are having to wrangle with these these new types of contracts and advisory issues around technology and privacy, which they didn't have to before. So certainly all are welcome, and I think, like you, this is the reason why so many of us continue to find this area very challenging and interesting, because it's always changing. But maybe on that point, I know, kind of going back to the beginning, this is where you are now, but our members are always really interested to hear people's journeys of how they got here. I have to confess myself, I was not a child geek that was interested in technology. I mean, to be honest, I'm quite old. So back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile devices. We had a sort of computer that we might have 3 video games for. That was about it. So it was completely fresh to me. But what about you guys? Were you interested in technology, or did you get into it organically? And I guess it'd be really interesting to hear that aspect, but also your journey into law, particularly given the US system, I know is pretty different from the UK system. So maybe I'll go backwards this time and ask you, Marcela, like, were you a tech geek at heart, or how did you end up where you are today?
I was not a tech geek. I think I'm probably old too, because I didn't have the internet growing up. It came when I was graduating from high school, so or maybe a little bit later than that. So I mean, I maybe had like the Atari video game. I don't know if people remember that. But I did. I think the most important thing, I've always been interested in learning. I think that's the main thing. I always want to grasp more things and more concepts. And so I have a little bit different background. I was born and raised in Colombia. I studied law there. I started practicing law at another firm in Colombia. And one day there was an opening for an associate working in the intellectual property group. And for me, that was really foreign. That was like, what is that? I wasn't really sure. I mean, it was a very, very baby. I was still in law school there then. But it sounded interesting. It sounded new. It sounded novel. And I just dipped into it and just went full on and started reading a lot and learning, and got even more interested. And then when I saw that it was so, it was changing all the time. Like at the end of the day, technology changes so much. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the century, it was the whole thing about Y2K, and remember that our computers were going to die between December 31st and January 1st. And then it was the Internet of Things, and then it was cloud computing. Cloud computing was such a foreign concept, right? And then it was artificial intelligence, although granted, artificial intelligence has been for many, many years, but like there's always something evolving, right? Drones, machine learning, blockchain, there's always something new. And so that's what's really fun, right? It always you're always on your toes. You're always learning new stuff.
Absolutely. And how about you, Alison? Did you have, were you a 9-year-old who said, I'm going to be a lawyer one day, Mom? Or how did you?
I don't know that I said that, but my parents probably said that because I have always liked to ask questions and argue. So I don't know that I'm even a tech geek now. I'm not as tech savvy as you would expect a tech lawyer to be. My journey to this moment was very circuitous, not at all linear. So in the US, for those of you who don't know, you do 4 years typically of university, and you can do it in whatever you want. And most of the time it doesn't even inform, or doesn't have to inform what you want to do in your career, unless, you want to go into medicine, there are certain prerequisites. And then you do 3 years of legal training. You then have to take a very arduous exam to be admitted to an individual state bar. So I was a history major in college. I always loved history. I ended up choosing to go to graduate school for a PhD in US history. And I always knew that law school might happen in the future. I took the LSAT, which is the admissions exam for law school, when I was still an undergrad. And about 2 weeks into my tenure at USC, where I did my doctoral training, I had a coffee with a professor in the law school who had done a JD and a PhD at Stanford before it was an official program. And I walked from that coffee to the advisor's office in the history department. And I said, I think I'll do that. And the thing is, a PhD can take, for history, I think it takes on average between like 7 and 9 years. So what I was saying was insane. And the advisor almost fell off his chair. But once you make the decision that you're going to do both degrees, you can't stop and think about it, because if you stop and think about it, you'll never do it. I had always planned on studying legal history. In particular, my focus and my dissertation was on legal and political battles surrounding reproductive health, so contraceptives and the like. And I specifically wrote about domestic conflict around those issues informing our foreign aid policy. All of that is to say, law school actually fit into that narrative, and it made me a better historian. And I also figured out early on into the PhD that I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't want to be, that is a crazy job market. And I admire my friends who are all in academia, but it wasn't for me. Then when I was at Berkeley finishing or working on my law degree, I did them concurrently. I did a summer associateship. So many of the higher ranked law schools, it is very common for you to do a summer associateship at one of the big firms, the Baker McKenzies of the world, or I was at Morrison and Forrester, where I met Sue actually. So I did a summer associateship there, and I was splitting my time between litigation and tech transactions. And I was only splitting with tech transactions because the partner who interviewed me for MoFo, and yes, that is really what we call the law firm, was a tech transactions partner, and we hit it off really well. And so I was working on his team, and I went to a lunch session where one of the associates was talking about a client that they were working on, or that they were assisting with the distribution of contraceptives. And I said, okay, so this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was like, I was finally justified in all of this schooling. It all led to this. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up working in there after law school. I worked on some very high profile pro bono cases that directly drew upon my expertise in reproductive health law. And then an opening appeared on the privacy team. The head of the tech group asked if I was interested. And like I said before, a lot of this was just, I happened to have a coffee with this professor, and someone asked if I wanted to dip my toe in the privacy pond. And so it was really just, I wasn't going in any one direction. I was following the interesting questions and the work that arose and the opportunities that arose. And so I went to the privacy team. And when I was on my second maternity leave, a recruiter from LinkedIn reached out, and I loved the firm. I loved the privacy work. The faculty, the partners there were really amazing mentors. Privacy is a really interesting field. Talk about new questions every day, new laws every day. And but I was on maternity leave, and I got a call from a recruiter, and my sister works at LinkedIn. So she's in sales, and she's been desperate for me to come and join her because she so believes in the product and the company culture. And so I said, that sounds interesting, but I'm supposed to go back from maternity leave in 8 weeks. So if this is going to happen, it has to happen before I go back. And that's a very rapid time turnaround to interview. And here I am a year and a half later, and I love it. So it was I wouldn't advise my path to anyone because it was a grand
plan. It was more, you picked up opportunities when they arose.
Exactly. And I'm very happy I did the PhD. I do think it actually makes me a better writer, and I think I'm able to transition and translate legalese to non-lawyers, which is a very valuable skill. So that is how I ended up here.
Thank you for that. And Amanda, I think in a way, there because I know your story that you're going to share, or some of it at least, and I know there are some common threads, I think, between all of you in terms of your sort of adaptability and sort of looking out for opportunities.
Yes.
Is that fair? Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. So I think I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger, but I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I'm going to date myself now and say I watched LA Law as a child. And it was a program in the US about lawyers in California who worked at a law firm, and it was all very exciting, and they were always in court. And I had no idea if that was accurate or not accurate. Both my parents were teachers. We didn't have any lawyers in the family, so I didn't know. So that was the sense I always had. But my parents definitely grabbed onto the idea that I was interested in being a lawyer and fostered that throughout my education. So in college, again, very much like Allison said, I didn't have to pick something that I knew would take me to whatever the next step in my life would be, or my career, but I was interested in public policy. I majored in policy analysis, and I did a minor in healthcare policy. And so I learned about Medicare, which is the public health insurance for older people in the United States, and some others. Medicaid, which is the insurance for low income people, and some others, depending on what where you qualify for the rules. And so I was really excited to be part of that and to learn. And that's how I ended up coming to Washington, DC, because I knew that I was interested in health policy, and where else to do it but in DC. So when I went to law school right after college, because again, it never occurred to me to take time off and go do something else before I went to law school. I just wanted to do it, get it done. So I went to law school, and the things that I pursued in law school, again, I didn't have to pick a focus, but I took healthcare classes in addition to the core curriculum. And when I was looking for summer associate jobs, I looked at firms that had healthcare work available. So when I was a summer associate, I mostly focused on healthcare. I tried a couple of other things, but ended up getting hired at Vincent Elkins at the time, and doing Medicare, working on Medicare appeals, reimbursement, administrative law. And it was interesting. It was very technical. I really enjoyed the administrative aspect of it, because I think that taught me a very specific, very particular way of thinking about how things worked and how the government works. But I started getting involved in like the DC bar. There was a young lawyer section. And through that, I found out about an opportunity at the American Psychological Association. So while it was healthcare, it was in-house, it was at a nonprofit. And psychology was one of the classes I had taken in college, being interested in healthcare. So I figured, well, let's give this a shot. And it was great to go there to kind of see what the focus was. I wasn't in the general counsel's office. I was in something called the practice director, which was where we couldn't give actual legal advice to psychologists, but we helped practicing psychologists figure out like what to do. It was just when HIPAA was being enacted. A lot of insurance companies at the time were focused on trying to get psychologist psychotherapy notes in order to qualify reimbursement. So there was a fight against that. And so how did that work? And essentially it was, it was learning about a different type of healthcare law, but still healthcare, and, my foray a little bit into policy. I'm not going to go through every job I've had, but I did jump around a lot to get to where I am today. For me, it was always, what can I learn that's different? How can I get more responsibility? Do I want to get a pay increase? And so that was kind of how things changed. So I ended up in-house at another healthcare company doing more mental health benefits work, and then ultimately ended up at a company called ACS, which was acquired by Xerox while I was there. And what they did was a lot of work related to Medicaid managed information systems, and so healthcare technology. And that was really my first taste of, how does technology really apply to healthcare? What are the technology transactions that I need to think through? Dealing with government contracting, which was also really interesting, doing a little bit of HIPAA. So I kept going through health, but starting to go a little more to technology. From there, I jumped to a healthcare software company where I was the only lawyer in-house. I worked with some contract managers who were part of my staff, but it was me. And so that was very educational to be the only lawyer. Luckily, I had outside counsel and other experts that I could rely on, but it was very much like, okay, the legal department stopped with me. And so it's a very different experience than being in-house with colleagues. And then from there, with some changes that happened and the company being sold, I ended up 7.5 years ago at Accenture. Now, before Accenture, I'd only ever stayed at a place 3 years. And so it was interesting to come into a company and still be here now, all this time later. And so I started out doing, again, healthcare contracting, some public service contracting, working on technology, electronic medical record implementations, clinical care technology. So more technology than healthcare, so to speak. But the nice thing about Accenture, and one of the things that I think has kept me here, is you're always learning. There is always something new to do. There's different people to interact with. It's a huge organization. And so I started to take deals a little bit here and there outside of healthcare, learning more. And then fast forward to 2016, I was at an event and somebody did a 10-minute presentation on how blockchain could help privacy. It was related to something going on in Estonia. And I was just fascinated. So I went out on maternity leave not long after, and it was very easy to, not so easy, but you can read your phone while you're breastfeeding and doing what you need to do. And so I read a lot about blockchain while I had one hand free. And so basically that was how I learned more and more. When I got back to work, I said, I wonder who's working on this at Accenture. I got in touch with the folks in legal, my former colleague, Victoria Libben, who Sue McLean knows very well, and started working with her and eventually made the transition into the blockchain role. So I think, for me, it was, although here's what my advice would be from my experience. You really can't make a bad choice because you never know where your decisions earlier in your career are going to lead you. I will say for me, I personally think that maybe I had this idea that it was healthcare. It was always going to be healthcare. So I will say, keep an open mind. Everything worked out great for me, but I do think that sometimes in retrospect, I had this vision, and it wasn't bad, but I would just say, keep an open mind. And then I will also say what Allison said earlier, all of the opinions I share in here are mine, not the views of Accenture. And so this is the world according to Amanda.
Oh, can I just jump in and say that you had a much more intellectually stimulating reading list while you were breastfeeding?
I
just want to throw that out there. I watched a lot of Great British Bake Off.
I watched a lot of Lost the first time. I think I watched like 5 series in about 2 months. But yeah. I think, to me, it's always a good sign, because my family also think I'm a bit strange for reading about things that related to my work on holiday, for example. But I think that's a sign that you are really interested in your area. If you are on maternity leave reading blockchain, or if you're like me on holiday reading about AI or something, because it's just something that you're really passionate about. And I think that's kind of helpful. I must say, when I'm talking to associates on my team and they haven't quite decided what area they want to specialize in, because technology is such a broad church, like what are the areas I really want to specialize in? And I always say, well, it's the kind of thing that you would do even if you're really busy. If that opportunity comes to your desk, do you seize it? Do you want to read about it like outside of hours? If you do, then you're probably really interested in that area and you're curious and you want to do more in it. So maybe that's a good, it's a good example there, Amanda. Right, I'm now going to take a bit of a switch to turn and just spend a little bit of time talking about tech law in the US and sort of themes and trends that you're seeing. I mean, we're obviously now very much a global tech market, and so I think there is a lot of commonality really in some of the biggest legal and regulatory sort of challenges we're seeing at the moment. But obviously there's so many of them, whether it's data privacy or AI regulation or platform, focuses on the platform regulation again and liability. But I was going to ask each of you, what do you think are the hottest topics? And also I think the audience would be interested, do you think now that we have a new administration, will we see any sort of significant changes in this area? I know people have floated around, with all these new enhanced state laws around data privacy, for example. Could this now be the time for a federal law on privacy? But it would just be interesting to hear, what do you think is going to keep us all busy, or at least in the US over the next few years? What about you, Marcela? Do you have any hot topics you think are going to keep tech lawyers very busy?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I think one thing that's going to keep us really busy is artificial intelligence generally. There's a lot of topics that spring out of the concept about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, there's the privacy aspects of that. There's the equity aspects of it. I mean, there's a lot of discussions about whether the use of artificial intelligence is equitable or discriminatory. There's IP aspects of it, right? Like, can a machine create an artwork? Or there's this whole concept about NTFs now, like these these things created out of machines that are being valued at ridiculous amounts. And so I think that there's going to be some regulation about that on that. I mean, certainly in the EU. There's been some talk about that and some in not yet in the US, but I think that's going to come. And on privacy, I mean, privacy is, although it's a very established field, it's also in a way a new field. I mean, in the US, for those of you who don't know, we don't have a federal privacy law. It's all based on state laws, and so there's a very disparate system. It's very different. I mean, I admire Allison because it is really difficult to be a privacy attorney in the United States. Like, you have to know many different laws and many different, and it's also not a single law in each state. It's also, I mean, there's laws that applies to specific industries, right? Like healthcare or the financial sector. And so I'm curious to hear my panelists' view on this. I don't think a federal privacy law is coming anytime soon, but I might be surprised.
Yeah, what do you think, Allison?
So again, this is where I remind everyone I speak on my own behalf and do not represent the views of my company or their parent company. I think it's unlikely. As Marcela said, it's very much a patchwork of state laws. And for those of us working at companies like LinkedIn or Accenture too, I would imagine, that have a global presence, it's not just the state laws, but also GDPR and laws that are coming out of Korea and India and really anywhere we do business, Brazil, Canada. So it really is a patchwork. We at LinkedIn take a global approach to privacy using GDPR because it's the gold standard. It's the most restrictive. As far as I don't think that a federal law is coming. This is where I also draw in my US historian hat, or put that hat on. It takes so much to get any law passed in the United States with a bipartisan Congress that I don't think that, while it is a high priority for me to have, consistent law, but I don't know that this Congress will be able to get that done. I'm not that optimistic. I think the more states that pass the laws, California has CCPA on the books, PRA is coming into effect shortly. Virginia just passed a law. I think that as more states do, the courts will probably have to take up the mantle of reconciling them. But I don't see a federal law as likely in the next, at least not right now with this Congress, unless something really changes. As to what, the hot topics, and this ties also to the laws themselves, I'm always thinking about who owns my data, who knows what they know about me. In California, the CCPA allows California residents to, and I'm not going to get into the granularity of it, but much like GDPR, to control who can and cannot do what with their data. But even that, I think, you know, I as a data privacy lawyer am opting out of the sale of my personal information, but I don't know that everyone is. And I think with social media in particular, there's, you know, who has access to my personal information, to the personal information about my kids, be it via cookies or, you know, buying a package, and then all of a sudden we're getting catalogs for everything. You know, you buy one pair of shoes and now you're getting catalogs for all the shoes. So those are the issues that I'm thinking about. I think that they really, privacy, as I said to someone the other day, it's the next frontier, right? We don't even know what's going to happen next because we don't know what the technology is going to be doing, which is why it's such an interesting field and can also be a little bit terrifying. But
yeah, I mean, certainly in Europe, what was part of the impact of GDPR is actually public awareness about personal data privacy. Yes. Did increase. It's still fairly, you know, there's a lot of people who still don't really quite understand how this works, and I think the regulators understand that, which is why they're so focused, particularly on things like ad tech, or, you know, where they feel like there's invisible processing that people don't really understand what the bargain is. You know, maybe you understand that your phone is tracking you, but you're happy for yourself to be tracked by, you know, right. Google Maps, because it's a useful service. But with something that the kind of consumers just don't really know that's being collected, you know.
Totally. I also think that with COVID being, and the fact that we've made it to you know, this far into a session and COVID hasn't come up until right now is impressive given our climate. But I think that from a consumer basis, so much has been, priorities have shifted. So we don't care if we're getting tracked. We just want the medicine delivered to our house. Or, you know, my sister called me the other day, should I sign up for this vaccine notification, whatever it was? Or I guess it was a website where you could sign up and they would let you know if a pharmacy had access. And I said, okay, let me look. And the privacy policy was from 2015. I said, no, maybe don't give them your information. Now, she was savvy enough because that's what I do, but I think that everyone's priorities have shifted. So I think we're still waiting to see how do you remember Etch-a-Sketch? It was a red toy with a dial and you would kind of draw with sand. I'm doing a terrible job explaining, but the expression of, we'll see how the Etch-a-Sketch shakes out.
Yeah.
I think the map needs to be, I'm mixing all my analogies.
Yeah,
so
no, I
think COVID overshadows everything.
I think that's right. Things like digital identity, you know, we've got this discussion now, right, around vaccine passports. And, you know, historically, even in countries where they were very anti the concept of digital identity, if it means freedom from lockdown, people are maybe more open to it. Amanda, though, coming to you now, right, you're in the space where the regulatory sands are definitely moving, and Marcela already talked about, you know, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which I agree. I'm not sure I get why you would spend, you know, was it $29 million on a tweet, or
right.
$52 million on a digital art that you could just print off. But for some people, they're very valuable, exciting, you know, assets. But yeah, blockchain and crypto, is this you think a hot area in the US? I know that we've had state law, you know, sort of a little bit of state laws, legislation around blockchain and crypto, but is this an area you're tracking closely with your blockchain hat on?
So I think I have a lot of things to say about this. Again, my opinions, not those of my employer. Basically, I'm not sure where it's all going to land. I don't think any of us are. I think it's been such a strange year, again, to bring back the COVID metaphor. People are home, people are looking at things. There have been all these articles about people. I mean, there was just how NFTs have come about, how, you know, how crypto has really, you know, changed, how Coinbase went public. And so how do all these things work, and how does popular culture adopt them? And so as they become more popular, obviously the regulators are going to pay more attention is this something we should be taxing? Is this something that we, you know, need to make sure that consumers are protected? Again, not sure with our, you know, federal landscape and having a bipartisan Congress, how much will be done now or not be done, but I think it's something that's being paid attention to. Don't know where things are going to land. we'll see what happens, but it is something that we're tracking closely. I mean, really, to kind of build on a little bit of both of these conversations related to regulation, I think in the absence of regulation, it's incumbent on those of us who develop these offerings and develop these products to say, okay, what are the things that we're concerned about? What are the things that we want to make sure we're doing in an ethical, responsible, and sustainable way? And so, if you're developing something, whether in AI or using a blockchain or distributed ledger, and whether you're collecting personal data or not, how is it being used? Who is it being used by? Is it possible that what you develop has unintended consequences? And so, yeah, there's what the regulations say, but sometimes it takes time. It really does take time for the regulations to catch up to the evolution of the technology. And so, I really think that there's a responsibility on us to say, okay, just because we can do this, should we do this? And that's a really important question, I think, for us as lawyers. And it's an exciting question, I think, for us to say, okay, as we learn about these things, as we're educated, what can we do? I'm just going to answer the question in the chat that was directed to me. To what extent did you have to throw yourself into the technology around blockchain to do your job? Well, okay, it's a lot. I'm not going to lie. I think in my head, I had this idea of how it worked, but I had to really break down the components like, okay, what is hashing? Why does hashing make it secure? How do you validate a hash? And all the different ways that you have, proof of work and proof of stake. I'm not going to bore you all with the technicalities, but really digging into each piece and learning it myself. And I will say this, the best way to learn it yourself is to teach somebody else. So it was my job to teach legal about what blockchain was and what distributed ledgers are, and the different legal implications that we have and how to keep an eye on it. And honestly, that was how I learned, and I would recommend that to anyone. If there's a topic you're interested in, raise your hand and say, I'll learn it, I'll teach it, and then boom, you're the expert.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah, go Alison.
I joined the privacy team at MoFo, I think May 20th of 2018. So that was like 5 or 6 days before GDPR went into effect. It was like jumping on a fast moving train. I had no idea what I was doing. So I building on the common thread is take the opportunities, right? Just because you don't know it, that doesn't mean it's foreclosed to you, right? Learn the block, read up while you're nursing or on the tube or whatever the case may be. Particularly with technology, because so much of it is so new, there are always opportunities to get involved, even if you don't have any history with it. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's so true. And that's what I say, particularly to the younger associates I meet, or, trainees or people at university, is actually you can be an expert in some of these new technologies at a fairly junior level, because there'll be people who've been doing technology law for 30 years and doing a lot of outsourcing and, and they've had to get their heads around cloud and all these new technologies. But some of the latest technologies, we're all learning at the same time. I'm learning about AI at the same time as my 2-year qualified colleague. Some of the folks in my team that are some of the real experts at Bakers in London on ad tech are quite junior lawyers in qualification, because they've just been immersed in it since they qualified. So I think it's a great opportunity. Actually, that's what's great about technology. You don't have to be, some practices, maybe you've been doing the same thing pretty much for 20 years. The law hasn't changed that much. This is an area where, the world's your oyster, really. If you want to spend your time getting clued up on something, there's lots of information out there. I'm going to ask a question now, and again, it'd be interesting to hear, because obviously we talked about, as part of our mission here at SCL, legal technology is also part of it. There's the tech law part, but there's also legal technology and innovation, and now quite a lot of our members are in that sort of legal tech community. I'd just be interested to hear from you. Are you seeing that in your particular practice yet? Are you seeing the take up of legal technology and tools that's making your job a bit easier, or changing the way that you do your role than might have been the case a few years ago? I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. Marcela, are you it's still early days, I think, for some of the tools in a sort of more transactional field than, say, litigation or corporate, but maybe
it is. Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, it's certainly been around for a number of years. I think in the past few years, there's been a much more prevalence of legal tech. And it's interesting because now there's entire, I mean, at least in the US, there's entire conferences and seminars about legal tech. I mean, and it's also interesting that before, law firms didn't used to have like these divisions about putting more technology. Now you have like a whole IT person dedicated to like legal tech at law firms. There's entire positions doing that, or knowledge management and using legal tech. So there's definitely a change. I mean, e-discovery is an area where legal tech has been used for years. There's also legal tech and like M&A support. There's software that actually helps you review contracts and summarize contracts. And it's interesting because clients are getting a hold of that too. And so I've even seen clients saying like, we won't pay for first years. We will pay, like if you have a first year on the bill, like we won't pay for that. We'll pay for anything that actually adds value because a machine can already do what the first year is doing. Like if they're reviewing contracts, just get the software to do that. I don't know if we'll get there at some point. And of course, there's all these scary stories about like lawyers will be replaced by robots. I don't think so. We probably won't get there, but I do think that there's going to be more and more a demand of clients, and law firms need to keep up with incorporating more technology into the practice of law.
Yes, we'll smart contracts replace lawyers.
Yeah, what about you, Amanda? I mean, Accenture, do you have a lot of legal tech? I mean, I've heard there talk about, you know, chatbots for certain, you know, lower hanging fruit in terms of giving advice to the business and things like that. Is that something you're seeing a lot of or more of?
I think where I think we're using technology really well is in terms of, you know, understanding what we've done with our contracts, what's in them, using data and analytics and understanding, you know, the different patterns that we're seeing in terms of what we've agreed to, what we haven't agreed to. And that's really cool and a really helpful tool in terms of thinking about where we've been and where we're going. I also think too, in terms of things when you're dealing with non-standard contracts and non-standard approvals, and so how to, you know, review those things quickly. There's a lot more tools than we had even when I started 7.5 years ago to really get to what are the key issues and get those escalated and addressed quickly, and using the technology to do that. And so we've made it very easier with our own homegrown tools to do that. So I think that's been, you know, a really cool advantage that that we have in-house. You know, I know I joked about smart contracts for a second, but I think it's true. I don't think lawyers are going to be replaced by smart contracts. I think you know, right now, smart contracts are neither smart nor contracts, according to me, but and some others. But it's kind of like, it is interesting to see how certain things potentially could be coded and how technology can help the law and can help transactions. And also think about what are the unintended consequences if something is coded incorrectly, but it has, you know, contractual implications. One of my colleagues is taking a Python class. He's a lawyer and he's learning how to code. And I think it's awesome. And I know there's a lot of lawyers that do that. And it's something you have not had the opportunity to do, but if you're interested, I would say go for it. I don't think that, you know, investing in yourself you know, to learn technology and to learn coding is ever a bad thing.
And what about you, Alison? Are you seeing a lot of it at LinkedIn yet, or it's still a journey, I think, for many organizations in terms of how they use it effectively? There's a lot of interest in it, but how to...
Yeah, it hasn't really touched us yet, but stay tuned. I'm sure it will.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a few. So we've got about 11 minutes left, which is amazing. I don't know where the time goes. I could talk to you guys forever, but I'm going to do a bit of a mixture of a quick fire quiz, I think, and also try and feed in some of the questions that I've seen come through, if you'll bear with me. So the first one, actually, I was going to ask you anyway, so I'll kind of merge my question with a question from the audience, which is, I guess, if you took yourself back, is there one thing you would tell your younger self, either to do or not to do, in terms of navigating a career? Because people, yeah, like, you know, what was, you know, I think, like, for me, I would say, don't be so afraid. Just throw yourself at things, because, you know, what's the worst could happen? But I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts. Marcela, what would you tell your younger self back in Colombia?
I want to start with that because one thing I've suffered all my life is with the imposter syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is, but at least in the US, it's very real. Like I've always thought I'm a fake, right? I've always thought that somebody's going to pull the curtain and see that I don't know what I'm doing, and I do know what I'm doing. Like I know it because I've done well, and but I always like wake up and feel like is somebody gonna like call on me, and so I would tell my and I don't know if part of that is being a woman or growing up in a different country or the way I was brought up. I think it's a confluence of a lot of things, but I think I mean the one thing I want to transmit is just believe in yourself because you're good, and don't let anything, and as Sue says, like be courageous, but not only be courageous, but really just be believe in yourself because you can rock it.
Absolutely. What about you, Alison? What would you tell yourself back at college?
It's not going to be unique. It's what Marcela just said, is you have to trust that it will work out. I had blind faith that doing the PhD where I was making and saving no money, and then taking on all this student loan debt, which I'm still paying off, that it'll be worth it. I'll get a job. It'll work out. It will work out. And it did, and it does. And there are low points and high points, but there are no wrong ways to get to where you want to be, what your career will look like. It's also not just about the career, right? That, try and that it is possible. We are women, so it's the fact that we haven't, aside from the breastfeeding tangent, it is possible to be a lawyer and a mom. It is possible to have both careers. And just, you have blind faith in yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will, right? So trust the process, use your network, right? I've always been very, there's a very neat thing. There's something called Jewish geography, where I'm Jewish, and you meet someone. Oh, where did you go to camp? Oh, do you know so-and-so? It's networking, but it's a very cultural thing. But for me, that's always been a strength, connecting the dots and knowing who knows who and putting them together. And so never underestimate that the person you'll have lunch with when they're in your office for a month, like Sue, that it's important for friendship building, but don't be afraid to use those contacts. Don't be afraid to use your own personal geography, because especially, women want to help lift each other up, and we need to do it. So blind faith and use your network.
I think that's a great idea. And network. And I'll do the selling for you. I mean, if I'd had LinkedIn back in 2000, I'd have so many useful contacts now. And I think you don't, because everybody rises, right? And everyone ends up doing interesting things. So nowadays, if you're a junior associate or a trainee or a student and you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn, because that community is really helpful to you going forward. And I certainly didn't have that capability when I was younger, and I wish I had. Amanda, what about you? What would you tell your younger self?
So I do want to go back to what Marcela said. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it's a real thing for all of us, and particularly for women. And I mean, there's been studies that show that imposter syndrome in some ways helps you, but in other ways, it definitely holds you back. And so it's something that we all struggle with, and just really anything you can do to kind of rewire those paths that are telling you, oh my God, I'm not good enough. The sooner that you can get over that, I think the better for your career. Have that confidence and build that confidence as soon as you can. I mean, 5 years ago, I don't even think I would have admitted that I had imposter syndrome. And so it's really trying to say, okay, no, I'm good at this. I can do this. But it's true. I mean, networking is really important. I will admit, I am not as good on LinkedIn as I would like to be or should be. It's one of the things that I'm working on myself to say. And part of it is I really think I don't like talking about myself. I don't like, promoting myself. It's like, even when I will fully admit, when I switched into the blockchain role, I didn't like put it up on LinkedIn in maybe a way I should have. And I think being a woman, I struggle with that. And so I would say, don't be afraid to promote your accomplishments.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to. I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier in the week, and I was saying you have to. You are really good at promoting your other colleagues. I know that. I hear you say, great things about your colleagues. You have to kind of pretend that's you. You're doing your evaluation when you're putting yourself out there. It's what would I do for somebody else, and then get past the fact that it's you.
One other thing I would recommend is keep a file and keep a file of things that sort of help you remind you that you are good. And so like I had this folder in my Outlook at my prior firm where it was the I love me folder, right? And it was things like a client at the end of the deal, a client would say like, great job on this, you were really valuable, thank you. Or a partner said something like, you were instrumental in this, something like that. And it helped me too, like when my reviews came up, because I would bring up the file and say like, look, this is what I did in the past year, and this is, people like me. But it also sort of reaffirmed that I wasn't an imposter. And so the I love me folder is actually really important. And it helps for promotions too. Like if you want to seek a promotion in the current job that you're in, you have to write up like how good you are. So keep that folder and keep reminding yourself. The I love me memo is important.
I love that. It's a great idea. And also, I mean, certainly for the more senior people on the call, you know, I think being that sponsor for other women as well. And you know, I certainly see both female and male colleagues. You know, I will see within the partner group, an email will come in from a client, for example, saying, this person did a terrific job. And the proper sponsor will then share it with everyone and go, you know, look at what, you know, Sarah did or Richard did or whatever, and being that sponsor for your colleagues as well, because often, yeah, the quieter ones, and often, you know, whether they're male or female, won't do that self-promotion, so you can do it for them. Right, we have 3 minutes. I'm gonna ask,
can I add a really quick note? Even if I'm the most junior on the call, but you can also promote and celebrate each other, right? My colleague and I closed a huge deal yesterday, and I made a point of reaching out to her manager and the VP to make sure they knew, because that'll come around and help you. And again, we have to lift each other up, men and women, but take the extra 30 seconds to send the email to make sure that you're doing that, because it'll come around and they'll do it for you.
Yeah, people, you know, really do appreciate that kind of validation. I think it's, and we kind of forget, and some people don't need it, you know, but other people really do need that kind of pat on the back. It's very helpful. I certainly still enjoy it when somebody says you've done a good job. It's you know, reassuring. So we have 2 minutes. I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll wrap up. I think Alison was right that we didn't really talk about COVID, which was a great success of this talk, or this session. But I wondered if any of you would say you've learned anything about yourself during this kind of whole year of craziness, and also what's the thing you're most looking forward to when things open up and go a bit back to normal?
On a personal note, I really rediscovered reading for pleasure, and just connecting with that. Again, not something I could do that was social, but just reading and enjoying it. So that was one of the benefits that came out of this year. But I do think it was hard. It was hard for me to be the mom and be the lawyer and try to do both of those things well, and to get over being embarrassed if my kid was in the background on a call. I know nobody thought it was a big deal, but I still, you know, I still had that fear. And so that's something I'm trying to learn about myself, to embrace both of those roles and say things like the word breastfeeding on a conference call. So
normalizing it, it's great. Yeah. I think it has made us all more human. Marcela, what about you? Anything you've learned, or anything you're particularly looking forward to?
Yeah, I think this year has been challenging, particularly for women. I mean, there was an article in the New York Times about how women sort of carry the bigger load of even like coordinating kids' activities and things like that. And so COVID has put that disproportionately harder on women. And so it's certainly been a hard year. I'm certainly looking forward to hugging people. I'm Latin, and so like we do a lot of hugs and kisses. And so I actually am vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated now, and I hugged a friend the other day, and I held her really, really tight, because I really miss that. Sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's that kind of human contact we're all craving. And what about you, Alison?
So there's a lot of commonality between Jewish and Latin cultures then, because I just want to hug people. I too am fully vaccinated, and I saw one of my best friends this past weekend who's a pediatrician in LA and has been on the front lines. She works in a hospital, and I think I hugged her longer than she wanted to be hugged because I got so emotional, that contact. And it's hard to be, technology is wonderful, it's quite a way to end. Technology is great that we've been able to keep in touch, that my kids have been able to talk to and see their grandparents. but it's the in-person that I really miss, and that and baseball games. I'm a big baseball fan.
Yeah, I remember that about you. No, absolutely. I think, well, I'm giving all of the audience and the panelists a virtual hug, because that's been fantastic. Thank you so much, all the way from the US. I mean, that is the power of technology. That's so great. We would not have got this, you know, in London in a physical meeting with the SCL group. So thank you all so much. That was great. I could talk to you all day. So, but everyone's obviously very busy. So big thanks to you for joining us today. Thanks to the members and guests for joining us. This is your network, so please do reach out if you've got ideas for future sessions, or if you'd like to host or appear. We'd love to hear from you. And a few final plugs. We've got some events coming up. On Thursday, we have a really interesting session from the Digital Media Group on the digital disruption of the entertainment industry. Going back to Marcela, you know, tech is taking over everywhere, including entertainment. We also have an issue, which again, we've kind of touched on in this session. We've got a webinar on the 6th of May on bias issues in AI. So please look out for that on the website. If you are a student or a trainee, membership of the Society is free. So if you'd like to join, please do go to scl.org and learn more. But I'll just end us with a final thanks to everyone. Thanks for joining. And I hope you all have a very good afternoon and evening, or you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.